Let's go, girls. Welcome to Talk Wealthy to Me. I'm Michelle Taylor, founder of Women in Wealth. From breaking money myths to building wealth and achieving financial freedom, we're here to empower you to create your own path. Talk Wealthy. Now, join the conversation and let's change the way women think and feel about money. Okay, ready? Hey ladies, welcome back to Talk Wealthy to Me. I'm Michelle Taylor, and today we are talking about the shift that needs to happen when you own a business from being the founder to being the CEO. And if you are not a business owner, you may be thinking, oh, I might not get much out of this, but stick with me because I think that these conversations are the way that we understand all things money and financial, not necessarily the things that are only applicable to us. And that's when the magic happens. So for you founders out there, I want you to listen up because so often we get stuck in founder mode and need to shift to CEO mode, especially if we're building something that we want to sell. So if you are building a business right now, I want you to sit for a second and think about that question. And it may make you a little bit uncomfortable because let's face it, if we're not headed in the right direction, it means that we've got to pivot in some areas, but better face it head on than waste more time. And truly, that question is going to lead you down the right path. Are you building an income or are you building an asset? And neither of those things is wrong. It's just important to understand and feel tethered to the one that is the one you're chasing. Because in the early stages of entrepreneurship, this distinction is not going to matter much. Survival matters, right? Cash flow matters, paying the bills, getting clients matters. You're the strategist, you're the closer, you're the big thinker, you're the balloon and the string, the service provider. You're running operations, tech, and even sometimes the customer support line. Now, the business then is entirely dependent on you. And that dependence feels normal because you're the one that built the business. It's your baby. But there comes a point, and especially for women whose revenue is starting to stabilize and your income is climbing and you're starting to feel like you've got the hang of things. This is where that original mode may quietly be coming to a point where it's hitting the ceiling. Because let's face it, a business that requires your constant presence is not yet an asset. It's a job that you happen to own. And I know that that may sting a little to think about, but the reality is, if it's something that can't run, if you are not there, no one's going to want to buy that. But again, there's nothing wrong with that. If you don't want to sell a business and you want to shut it down at the end of the day and ride off into the sunset, then don't change anything. But if we're talking about building generational wealth, building something that other children or nieces or whomever can take over, then we're talking about building something that is a little bit different and needs to create leverage beyond your labor. And that's kind of when that whole evolution has to happen around the conversation and what we're focusing on. Investors, they're not buying effort. They are buying predictability. They're not evaluating how hard you work. Obviously, they can see that because the business has grown. What they want to evaluate is how risky is this future cash flow within the business if you're not there? And that shift in lens is going to change everything. So remember, it only matters if you want to sell this business. And if you do, imagine that for a moment, yesterday, somebody approached you and said that they were interested in acquiring your company. So exciting, right? Even if you're not ready to sell, just imagining the thought of that should give you butterflies and make you excited. But a thought that you might want to follow up with is, am I delivering something that is going to show clarity? That is what they want. They are going to ask for financial statements, and not the kind that require you to sit in the meeting and give an explanation or a reconstruction of what the business does. They don't want any of that. They want to see clean, consistent reporting. They want to understand what true profit margins are. That will allow them to know how they can grow those margins and make more money. They want to know how your revenue has grown over time and whether that growth is sustainable or erratic. And this is where many founders realize something that's really important. Revenue alone is not that impressive. And I know that that may feel weird to hear because everybody's chasing that big top line number, right? I want my business to do $1 million, $5 million, $10 million. But if your business is doing $1 million and it's costing you $950,000 to run it, then that might not be something that someone wants to buy. You want to make sure that if your $1 million business in revenue has slim margins and chaotic expense management, that you recognize that it's going to be less valuable. And even in comparing it to a company that's maybe doing $600,000 in revenue, but they've got strong, consistent profitability and good margins, well, they are going to be more attractive because valuation is tied to earnings. Often small businesses are valued based on a multiple of EBITDA. And EBITDA is something that may not be part of your day-to-day language, but what it stands for is your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's really the meat on the bone. And it may sound really technical, but what it is really measuring and showing us is that profit matters way more than top-line revenue. When you understand that, you're going to start asking different questions. Instead of asking, how do I grow revenue? You may start also asking, where is my margin the strongest? Which areas or offerings are the most profitable? Which clients are actually costing me more in time and resources than they generate in return? And those questions are the secret sauce because it's going to allow you to focus on what matters most. And that is making more money, right? And even if you aren't selling your business, you want to generate more income and wealth. But that emotional evolution, when it meets strategic clarity, well, it's a game changer. Letting go of revenue that looks really good on paper, but is eroding margin requires maturity and thick skin. And then that brings us to the question of revenue structure. Two businesses can be doing the exact same annual income, but be valued completely differently. And that's just based on predictability. If your revenue is one that has to be resold every single month, if every dollar requires fresh effort, especially if it's from you, then the business is going to carry a lot higher of a perceived risk. But if that other business is generating that revenue and a significant portion of it is reoccurring, so think contracts, retainers, subscriptions, the business becomes a lot more stable in the eyes of an investor because predictability lowers risk. Lower risk creates valuation multiples. So a founder who starts thinking like they're building an asset, well, then they might start asking, how can I create more reoccurring revenue within what I'm already doing? And those are the conversations that change the game. Because maybe that means you're going to shift from one-off projects to longer-term agreements or engagements. Maybe it means building in a subscription layer into the services that you're already offering. And maybe it means increasing client retention rather than obsessing over acquisition. And I know with certainty from, any industry out there, it costs a lot of money to acquire a client. It's far better to do such a good job that they never want to leave you. So maybe your dollars are spent better there. But these are all questions that you've got to ask if you're building an asset. These are really all structural changes, and structural changes compound, and they compound fast. Now, let's talk about something a little bit more personal, and that is the business actually depending on the founder. Most women are building their business around their competence and their relationships. We're really good at that. Clients hire you because your expertise is second to none. They trust you. They like you. They want access to you. And in the early years, that's exactly what's driving your growth. It's your attraction power. But from an investor's perspective, that dependence is called a huge risk around you being the key person. If your business cannot operate without you being involved in the day-to-day and closing every single deal or delivering every service, making every strategic decision, then what is actually considered transferable value is extremely limited. Because if you leave, the revenue leaves. And again, that's okay if that's what you want. But creating enterprise value is something that needs to be a focus. And oftentimes, if you give yourself a long enough runway, even if it is you and your talents that run a business, there are ways around that to still build something that you can sell and walk away from. But this evolution is the most difficult for founders because it requires delegation. And when you're growing a business that you love so much, and I jokingly referred to it in the beginning as your baby, but that's what it feels like. It is late nights. And this is where, from the perspective of people that don't start a business looking in, feel like it's all a cakewalk. But blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, there's an emotional attachment to building a business. And it's really hard to delegate things away, but you have to. And it has to also include documentation. It has to include building systems that may sometimes feel a little bit less personable and more repeatable. Because if it's repeatable, other people can step in and do it. It requires allowing someone else to close the sale, to deliver part of the service or client experience, or even just manage a relationship. And I've been there. I know how hard that is because for me personally, I pour so much into my people that I almost feel like I'm abandoning them. And I never want them to feel that way. Emotionally, it also feels like a total loss of control. How do I know that I'm standing by something that means something to me if I'm not part of it? But strategically, these are the things that have to happen in order to give birth to an asset that can grow beyond your wildest dreams. A business that runs without constant founder intervention is a business that can scale. It can be acquired. It can continue generating income even when you step back, or take a week to travel and do something that you love, refill your cup. You don't want to go somewhere and take your family and be checking in on your business constantly. You want to be able to sign out, put the out of office on, give yourself a chance to breathe and focus on you. And you can't do that if your life requires your business bringing in income. So think of it that way. It's a gift you give yourself. Another layer that a lot of times founders are overlooking is the concentration risk. And if 40 or 50% of your revenue is coming from one or two clients, that's another huge area of vulnerability. And it may feel comfortable and feel really good and even flattering, but it also means that your business is a lot more fragile. Because if that business fails or they're wooed away from you, well, now you're losing half of your revenue. An investor that's looking at a business, they're immediately going to discount its value because one contract termination could significantly reduce earnings, and that's a huge risk for them. So if you're an asset-minded founder, you need to make sure that you're diversifying your revenue streams intentionally. That is going to reduce dependency on one single client or one single revenue stream. You want to build depth within your teams. You want to be documenting your processes and systems that make this feel so good, because that knowledge will live inside of your company and not just inside of your head. And that means that on those vacations, you're not worrying about what your client experience is like, because everybody knows when to do what. And this is when that internal shift starts to become really crystal clear. And that is a game changer. So early stage founder thinking usually sounds like, how do I get paid this month? How do I make sure my people get paid this month? How do I make sure that my lights aren't getting turned off? Whatever it is, we've all been there, and it's where you start. And that's why you're so passionate about this, right? But if you're in the stage that you're growing, right? You're breaking down walls and crushing your goals, then your thinking needs to start to shift to something more like, how do I stabilize this income? Asset building mindset is thinking something like, maybe, how do I increase the long-term value of this company? And again, these are all okay, but you want to make sure that what you want is what you're building. And this final question is what's going to change true behavior. It's going to influence pricing decisions. It is going to influence hiring decisions. It will impact what opportunities that you say yes to and which you decline. And this is something that I've had to learn myself so many times. But when you're saying yes to something or no to something, you're saying yes or no to something else. So clarity around that and around your why will make a massive, massive difference. It is also going to prioritize sustainability over your ego. And I know, listen, all of us think that what we have built will crumble without us because of that emotional attachment, right? And that's okay, but checking your ego and making you realize that something that you have to be involved in every single day is beautiful, but something that will continue on and build real legacy is even better. Building an asset is totally different than building a brand. Building an asset means asking yourself, okay, if I stepped away from this thing for 30 days, what would break? And whatever would break needs to be the first thing that becomes your next system. It means that you're separating your personal identity from the infrastructure of what makes the wheels move. The brand may still be you, and that's what people are drawn to, and that's great. But the operations cannot rely solely on you. It just won't work. It also means reviewing your financials, because you guys, you have to check in on this all the time. And it's not just for tax compliance, but also for performance clarity. It means understanding your margins deeply enough to make strategic adjustments before problems surface and making sure that they're in alignment with what that end goal is. If you never sell, building as though you could creates leverage. And it creates optionality. It means that one day, if you do want to exit, either partially or fully, you're not starting from scratch. And let's be perfectly clear about something. You can sell a business that's a mess. You can. What you're going to lose, though, is power and negotiation. The more that has to be fixed, buyers are not going to walk away necessarily, but they are going to devalue what they're willing to give you. And if we can get ahead of that and make those changes well in advance, years in advance even, well, your future self will thank you. This is how we're going to build generational wealth. This is where those conversations start to really enter into the picture. A sellable business creates the possibility of a liquidity event. A liquidity event creates capital. Capital creates opportunities for you to invest personally Investment opportunities create compounding beyond your original effort. And now you're impacting your grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And what feels better than that? You're no longer trading your time for money. You are building equity. And equity is what really outlives labor. The most powerful shift in entrepreneurship and owning your own business is when you stop asking, how much should I make this year? And you start asking yourself, what is this company that I am building worth? Because worth reflects structure. It reflects sustainability. It reflects margin, predictability, and independence, all from you. Enterprise value. You're not just a founder. You're a steward of an asset in formation. And when you begin to build with that awareness, thinking strategically and emotionally, your business stops being just a source of income and it becomes a vehicle for wealth. And again, like I've said so many times, what you're building is meant to be unique to you. Don't think you have to exit or have to have a liquidity event or sell or pass a business on to a kid that doesn't want it. You don't have to do any of those things. What you have to do, though, is ask yourself the hard questions around what do you really want? This is taking so much from you. Make sure that you're building something that feels in alignment and familiar. You don't want to wake up one day and say, what have I done? I'm building something that I don't want to sell. I just want to make sure that I have financial freedom and never miss summer trips with my kids. Both paths are okay. Success and what that definition of it for you is uniquely yours. Just make sure that you spend some time checking in it and asking yourself to define it. Whatever you're building, put your heart into it and realize that it can be whatever you want it to be. Keep asking questions. Keep surrounding yourself with amazing people that are either cheerleaders or people that have done what you want to do, and go after it and let other people in. Let them see. It's not glamorous. It's not easy. These kind of conversations, even when you're having them with yourself, are hard and tricky to navigate. But man, the end result is worth it. So with all of that being said, don't stop growing. Don't stop having your conversations with yourself or the people around you. And let's keep changing the way women think and feel about money together.